November 1, 2006, 3 p.m., the Millennium Hotel in Mayfair, London. This was the setting for a cold-blooded murder that shook the intelligence world. Alexander Litvinenko, a former KGB agent, lay dying on the tea lounge floor. A faint smile crept onto his face as his eyes locked onto a cup, a seemingly innocent cup, in front of him. That was the moment when his world was about to end. The scene was one of utter chaos and confusion. Waiters scurried to and fro, trying to make sense of the commotion. Other guests looked on in horror, unsure what to do. The scent of Earl Grey tea wafted through the air, a stark contrast to the sense of dread that gripped everyone present. The soft hum of conversation was replaced by an air of unease. Litvinenko's once robust frame was now pale and gaunt, his body racked by the effects of the deadly poison that coursed through his veins. His face, usually filled with a mix of determination and intelligence, was now contorted in agony. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were beginning to lose their luster. The man who had once stood up to the Russian government was now fighting for his life. His body language screamed out for help, but it was too late. Witnesses described a man in his late 30s or early 40s, dressed in a suit, sitting across from Litvinenko. They couldn't quite place him, but they remembered him getting up and walking out of the tea lounge. Some claimed they saw him whispering something in Litvinenko's ear before leaving, but those details remain unclear. Another guest recalled hearing a faint whisper, "You have 10 minutes." Those were the only words spoken, but they would haunt everyone who was present. Before we go further, hit subscribe and the bell. We post new cases every single day. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you in-depth coverage of the world's most shocking crimes. From murders to conspiracies, we leave no stone unturned. Our team of experts and investigators work tirelessly to bring you the most accurate information available. Don't miss out on the latest updates, hit that subscribe button now. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story. Alexander Litvinenko was once a rising star in the Russian intelligence world. He was a key figure in the KGB and later the FSB. But Litvinenko's career took a drastic turn when he refused to follow orders to kill a high-profile businessman. The Russian government, led by Vladimir Putin, began to persecute him. Litvinenko fled to the UK, where he would become a vocal critic of the Russian regime. Litvinenko's decision to defect was not taken lightly. He knew the risks involved and the potential consequences of his actions. But he also knew that he had to stand up for what he believed in. He began working with British and Spanish intelligence, sharing his knowledge of the Russian mafia and its operations in Europe. Litvinenko's information was invaluable, but it also made him a target for the Russian government. Alexander Litvinenko, a 43-year-old former Russian intelligence officer, was the central figure in this tragic case. He lived in London with his wife, Marina, and their 2 children. Born in 1962 in Russia, Litvinenko joined the Soviet KGB at the age of 29 and quickly rose through the ranks. After fleeing Russia in 2000, he settled in the UK, where he became a vocal critic of the Russian government and President Vladimir Putin. His outspoken views often put him at odds with his former colleagues. As a former intelligence officer, Litvinenko's daily life was marked by secrecy and caution. He worked as a consultant, sharing his expertise on the Russian mafia and its European connections with British and Spanish authorities. His family life was strained due to the constant threat of retaliation from the Russian government. Despite this, Litvinenko was a loving father and husband, known for his charm and charisma. His outgoing personality made him a popular figure in the expat community in London, where he often socialized with other Russian émigrés. Litvinenko's likable and relatable nature made him a sympathetic figure in the eyes of many. His courage in speaking out against the Russian government, despite the personal risks, earned him international recognition and admiration. His outspoken views on the misdeeds of the FSB and his warnings about the dangers of Putin's regime resonated with many. Despite his flaws, Litvinenko was a complex and multifaceted individual, and his tragic death continues to fascinate and horrify people to this day. His legacy as a whistleblower and a champion of freedom and justice has inspired countless others. Litvinenko's relationships were complex and often fraught, particularly with his former colleagues in the FSB. He had few people he trusted, and even those he did trust were often compromised by their ties to the Russian government. In the months leading up to his poisoning, Litvinenko had grown increasingly paranoid, suspecting that he was being watched by Russian agents. His warnings and pleas for protection fell on deaf ears, and he began to feel isolated and alone. His wife, Marina, was his rock, but even she couldn't fully comprehend the dangers that her husband faced. It's November 1, 2006, a chilly autumn morning in London, England. The sun rises over the city, casting a pale glow over the streets. The weather is typical of this time of year, crisp and cool with a hint of moisture in the air. The streets are quiet, save for the occasional pedestrian rushing to start their day. The city is beginning to wake up, unaware of the unfolding drama that will soon captivate the world. It's been several months since Alexander Litvinenko, a former Russian spy turned whistleblower, began to speak out against the Russian government. He had been living in the United Kingdom, where he was granted political asylum in the spring of 2001, and had been working with British and Spanish intelligence to share information about the Russian mafia in Europe. His allegations about the FSB's misdeeds had sparked a heated debate, with many accusing him of being a liar and a provocateur. Litvinenko had received numerous threats, and his life had become increasingly precarious. His warnings about the dangers of the Russian government had gone largely unheeded, and now it seemed he was facing the consequences. The events of that fateful day would unfold like a tragic play. It started with a meeting at the Millennium Hotel in Mayfair, where Litvinenko had been invited to discuss a business deal with two men, Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun. They arrived at the hotel, and the three men sat down at a table in the hotel's Pine Bar. Over a cup of tea, Litvinenko began to feel unwell, complaining of a bitter taste in his mouth and a searing pain in his stomach. He excused himself, leaving the two men at the table, but within minutes he was back, clutching his stomach and stumbling towards the bathroom. He would never leave that bathroom alive. The most shocking detail of Litvinenko's poisoning would come later, when the results of his autopsy revealed that he had ingested a lethal dose of polonium-210, a highly radioactive substance that had been ingested through a cup of tea. This was no ordinary poison, but a highly exotic and deadly substance that only a handful of people in the world had access to. The implications were staggering, and the investigation that followed would lead to a complex web of intrigue and deceit. Andrei Lugovoy was the first to notice that something was wrong, but it was too late. He called for an ambulance, but Litvinenko was already in a state of acute radiation syndrome. The doctors who treated him would later reveal that his symptoms were unlike anything they had ever seen before. He was admitted to University College London Hospital, where he would spend the next several weeks in a critical condition. His death on November 23 would send shockwaves around the world, and the investigation that followed would expose a complex and sinister plot that would change the course of history. Theories are always welcome. Comment below, what do you think really happened here? Was this a lone wolf attack, or was it a state-sponsored assassination? Was Litvinenko's death a one-off, or was it part of a larger conspiracy? The truth is complex, and the more we learn, the more questions we have. As the investigation unfolded, the full scale of the crime became increasingly apparent. Litvinenko's poisoning was not just an isolated incident, but part of a larger web of corruption and deceit that stretched from the highest echelons of the Russian government to the very heart of British intelligence. The implications were staggering, and the questions that the investigation raised would haunt the world for years to come. But as the truth begins to emerge, one question remains. Who was behind this heinous crime? The investigation is ongoing, but the trail has gone cold. Will we ever know the truth, or will it remain a secret forever? We begin our investigation of the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko. On November 1, 2006, the former Russian intelligence officer was taken to the University College London Hospital after he fell seriously ill. Police were initially called to the scene where Litvinenko was found, and they quickly began to piece together the events leading up to his hospitalization. Litvinenko's condition was described as critical, and he was placed in an isolation ward due to concerns about possible radiation poisoning. The Metropolitan Police Service's Counter-Terrorism Command was brought in to assist with the investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence in the Litvinenko case is the presence of polonium-210 in his body. Tests revealed that Litvinenko had ingested a lethal dose of this radioactive substance, which is highly unlikely to be found outside of a nuclear facility. Detectives began to investigate the possible sources of this highly toxic material, leading them to several suspect locations, including a hotel room used by Andrei Lugovoy, a former KGB agent, and a Russian diplomat, Dmitry Kovtun. The investigation revealed that both men had been in contact with Litvinenko in the days leading up to his poisoning. Surveillance footage showed Lugovoy and Kovtun in London, but it was unclear what their intentions were. The investigation into Litvinenko's death focused on several key suspects, including Lugovoy and Kovtun. Both men had strong ties to the Russian government and had been accused of previous crimes. Detectives also turned their attention to other individuals who may have played a role in the poisoning, including former FSB colleagues of Litvinenko and Russian intelligence agents who had been in contact with him. The investigation was further complicated by the fact that many of the suspects were either in Russia or had left the country, making it difficult for British detectives to gather evidence. In addition, the Russian government was not cooperative with the investigation. One of the lead suspects, a man named Mario Scaramella, seemed at first like the perfect culprit. He was an Italian journalist who had been in contact with Litvinenko before his death, and detectives discovered that he had been in possession of radioactive materials. However, Scaramella's alibi checked out, and he was eventually cleared as a suspect. The investigation into Scaramella wasted several months of time and resources, and it was only later revealed that he was not the intended target. The Litvinenko case was beginning to show all the hallmarks of a complex and sophisticated operation. The twist or revelation nobody predicted was the use of radioactive polonium-210 to poison Alexander Litvinenko, a highly lethal substance that no one could have anticipated. This unexpected twist made the investigation much more complex and challenging. Litvinenko was poisoned in a teacup at a London hotel, and the radioactive material was detected in his body after his death. The investigation that followed revealed a sophisticated and complex plot. Litvinenko's death was a wake-up call for the world, exposing the lengths to which Russia's government would go to silence its critics. More detail on the twist revealed that the radioactive polonium-210 was likely obtained from a Russian nuclear facility. This information pointed to a level of planning and resources that was unprecedented in a targeted assassination. The use of this highly radioactive substance also meant that Litvinenko was exposed to an extremely high level of radiation, which caused his death. The investigation into the source of the polonium-210 was a major challenge, but ultimately led to the identification of the Russian nuclear facility. This revelation further implicated the Russian government in the plot to kill Litvinenko. The verdict or current cold case status is that the European Court of Human Rights has ruled that Russia was responsible for the assassination of Litvinenko. This ruling was a significant blow to Russia's government, and further strained relations between Russia and the UK. The UK had already concluded that the murder was probably approved by Mr. Patrushev, then head of the FSB, and also by President Putin.